Right now, in a quiet office in Berlin's Lichtenberg district, about 10 people sit piecing together shredded paper by hand. 16,000 sacks surround them, roughly 45 million torn fragments of Stasi surveillance files. At their current pace, the work will take centuries. Berlin was the only city where rival superpowers stood face to face for 4 decades, and the Cold War secrets they left hidden beneath it never disappeared. They survive in sealed tunnels, on rooftops, behind walls that millions walk past every day. What is still inside those sacks and buried across this city has never been fully told. 16,000 sacks line the archive vaults in Lichtenberg, each one packed tight with shredded paper. The official inventory lists 45 million fragments, an amount that would stretch for more than 100 kilometers if laid end to end. This is not a figure designed for effect. It is a physical reality, measured, weighed, and counted by the Federal Commissioner for the Stasi records. The numbers alone defy easy grasp. 45 million torn pages, sealed in brown bags, stacked floor to ceiling. Each sack holds the remains of surveillance reports, intercepted letters, and policy directives, all torn by hand in the final days of the regime. The sheer volume dwarfs the capacity of any ordinary archive. If every page were restored, the result would rival the length of the city's entire subway system. For the handful of archivists working inside, the task is not simply forensic, but Sisyphean. At the current pace, about 10 pages reconstructed per person per day. The full restoration would require centuries. This mountain of paper is both a monument to the scale of state surveillance and a daily reminder of how much remains hidden, waiting to be pieced together. The numbers are not abstract. They are stacked, bagged, and waiting in the dark, each one a fragment of a story not yet told. Inside the Lichtenberg archive, the work unfolds in quiet concentration. The team, never more than a dozen at any time, sits at long tables beneath the steady glow of magnifying lamps. Each archivist handles thousands of paper shreds every week, yet progress is measured in single pages. The method is slow and exacting. Fragments are laid out edge to edge, faded type, and torn lines compared, a sentence reconstructed one word at a time. There is no machine fast enough to automate the process, no shortcut for the human eye. Scotch tape and patience are the main tools. Most days, a single worker will complete 10 pages, sometimes fewer if the shreds are especially fine or the ink has bled. The task asks for skills more common to conservators than bureaucrats. It requires a steady hand, a sharp memory for fonts, and a tolerance for repetition. In this small room, the scale of the Stasi surveillance is reduced to the intimate labor of piecing together a stranger's story. The numbers, 45 million fragments and centuries of projected work, become real only in the hands that sort, match, and mend. Every bag opened is a puzzle without a picture, every page restored a small act of recovery. For the archivists, the daily routine is not about statistics, but about restoring voices to the silenced, one fragile scrap at a time. Teufelsberg rises above Berlin's western edge, its grassy slopes concealing a buried history. The hill itself is artificial, formed from nearly 26 million cubic meters of World War II rubble, enough debris to bury Albert Speer's unfinished military technical faculty beneath a mountain of broken stone. In the early 1960s, this unlikely summit became a focal point for a different kind of war. In 1963, the United States National Security Agency, joined by British Signals Intelligence, activated a listening post at Teufelsberg's peak. The station's geodesic radomes, 5 white domes, each engineered to shield vast arrays of antennae, could intercept radio and microwave traffic across a 500-kilometer radius. At its operational height, the compound housed up to 1,500 American and British personnel, all tasked with reading the airwaves of the Eastern Bloc. A veteran of the station, now in his 80s, recalls the daily rhythm. He remembers stepping inside the dome and clapping his hands. 7 seconds later, the echo would come back, like the building itself was talking to you. We listened to everything: military orders, embassy calls, even music drifting out of Moscow. We were not just eavesdropping, we were trying to understand what might happen next. The technical reach was matched by the strangeness of the place. The largest radome's echo, measured at exactly 7 seconds, was a side effect of the concrete and steel skeleton, the sound bouncing through a space designed for silence. Declassified NSA files confirm the station's code name, Stadifried. The scope of interception covered nearly all of East Germany, Poland, and Czechoslovakia. The work was relentless, but the operators knew the stakes. On the main building, a plaque remains that reads, "In God we trust, all others we monitor." It is a simple line, but it captures the mood of the era, a quiet conviction that vigilance alone could hold back catastrophe. Today, the radomes stand abandoned, their surfaces layered with graffiti. The echoes linger, a reminder that beneath the surface of Berlin, every hill and hollow carries the residue of surveillance and suspicion. Teufelsberg is both a monument to the Cold War's technological ambitions and a warning about the cost of listening in a world divided by walls. On the night of August 13, 1961, Berlin's subway map was quietly redrawn. Crews sealed off entire platforms in the space of hours, welding shut stairways and bricking entrances behind reinforced concrete. The orders came down from the East German Transport Authority and the Ministry for State Security. Every U-Bahn and S-Bahn station beneath the border was to be closed, locked, and guarded. Above ground, the wall was new and raw. Below, the city's arteries turned into silent corridors patrolled by pairs of armed police. Trains on the western lines continued to run their routes, but as they entered East Berlin, they slowed to 30 kilometers per hour. Doors stayed locked, lights flickered past empty platforms, and the only movement came from the guards, 2 men in uniform, rifles slung over their shoulders, watching for shadows that did not belong. The platforms themselves became time capsules, left with their 1950s signage and advertising untouched for decades. Conductors announced nothing. Passengers stared into the darkness, aware that just meters away, another world waited behind sealed doors. A former BVG operator, now retired, remembers the feeling. You'd pass through these stations where no one got on, no one got off. It was like running a train through a memory. His voice, preserved in the transport archives, carries the weight of years spent in limbo, shuttling between two Berlins that could see each other but never meet. Despite the patrols, about 150 people managed to escape through this underground no man's land. Some crawled through maintenance shafts, others bribed their way past guards, and a few simply ran for it when the chance appeared. One commanding officer even used his own authority to lead his unit westward, defecting in the process. Each escape was a calculation against routine, against the certainty of a gun or a locked gate. The final ghost platform at Potsdamer Platz reopened in March 1992. For 31 years, trains had slowed to a crawl, and the city's heart had beaten with a muffled echo. When the barriers came down, the first passengers stepped onto a platform that had been sealed longer than some of them had been alive. The city was stitched back together, but the scars remain, visible in the concrete, audible in the stories of those who rode the trains in silence. Beneath the wall, the ground was always wet. Berlin's high water table turned every escape attempt into a gamble against the earth itself. Between 1961 and the late 1970s, about 75 tunnels were started from the western side. 19 of them reached East Berlin, and around 300 people crawled to freedom through spaces barely wider than their shoulders. The technical challenge was severe. Loose, peaty soil threatened collapse, and winter freezes could trap diggers in sudden ice. Digging teams, often students or young activists, reinforced the passageways with scavenged timber and used hand-cranked bellows to force air through the darkness. Even so, the threat of flooding or a cave-in was constant. The Stasi adapted quickly. By 1970, their engineers had begun to dig parallel counter-tunnels, lacing the soil with ultrasonic microphones. These devices could pick up the faintest vibration, shovels scraping against sand, boots shifting in the mud. When the sensors registered a pattern, the Stasi would listen for days, sometimes allowing the tunnel to reach the border before collapsing it, trapping everyone inside. In one notorious case from 1962, a booby trap, a pressure-activated explosive, was wired to a tunnel's exit. The device was never triggered. An unnamed Stasi officer, reportedly moved by the desperation he witnessed, cut the ignition wire in secret and tipped off the diggers, saving dozens of lives. Tunnel 57 stands out among these stories. In October 1964, a team completed a passage 145 meters long from a West Berlin bakery to an East Berlin apartment. Over the course of one night, 57 people, students, families, even a border guard, crawled through the darkness to the west. One survivor, Thomas Klaus, later described the silence underground. You could hear your own heartbeat louder than the shovels. Above ground, the Stasi's retaliation was swift. Relatives left behind faced arrest, surveillance, and years under suspicion. For those who made it out, freedom came at the cost of a city's trust and the knowledge that every escape triggered new layers of control. Concrete walls nearly 3 meters thick rise at Friedrichstrasse, where the Reichsbahn bunker endures as a monument to Berlin's shifting fears. Built in 1942 by forced labor for the Deutsche Reichsbahn, the bunker was designed to hold 10,000 people against Allied bombs. By the war's end, its purpose changed overnight. The Red Army took control, turning the shelter into a makeshift prisoner of war camp for German soldiers. Later, Soviet administrators used the space to store railway equipment, its cold corridors filling with the detritus of a defeated city. In 1957, the bunker took on a new identity, a refrigerated warehouse for Cuban fruit, earning the nickname Bananen Bunker. Pallets of bananas and citrus arrived by train, stacked beneath the original air raid signage. The concrete kept the cold in and the past at bay. By the late 1970s, as Cold War anxieties deepened, West Berlin authorities retrofitted the structure for nuclear civil defense. Blast doors, air filtration systems, and sealed stocks of ration packs and gas masks were installed. Some of these supplies, 1980s-era tins and emergency kits, remain untouched on the shelves. After the wall fell, the bunker's thick silence was broken by a new kind of gathering. Between 1990 and 1995, the vaults became home to a techno club, where Berlin's youth danced beneath wartime concrete. When the club closed, artists moved in. Today, the space operates as a private gallery, its inner chambers lined with contemporary art, while a glass penthouse sits above the old blast roof. Katrin Schmidt, the current steward, describes the responsibility as both privilege and burden. You can never forget what's beneath your feet. The Reichsbahn bunker's survival asks uncomfortable questions. Each adaptation, from forced labor shelter to art gallery, layers new meaning over old wounds. The building outlasts every regime that tried to define it, leaving behind not just relics, but the uneasy memory of what people once prepared for and what they chose to remember. The Stasi's reach was measured in numbers, but its true impact landed on individual lives. At its height, the Ministry for State Security counted around 91,000 full-time officers, an internal army larger than many European militaries. Its network of informants stretched even further, with estimates suggesting one for every 6.5 citizens. The result was a surveillance apparatus that produced 111 kilometers of paper files documenting the daily lives, private thoughts, and whispered doubts of 5.6 million East Germans. Yet these statistics only hint at the cost. Historian Hubertus Knabe, who has spent decades studying these archives, describes the Stasi's methods as a system called weaponized intimacy. Trust became a liability. Neighbors, friends, even spouses could be enlisted as informants, their reports stored alongside those of professional agents. The files were not just records. They were instruments of control, capable of upending careers, ending marriages, or turning suspicion into social isolation. One name stands out among the many: Ulrich Muehe. The acclaimed actor, best known for his role in The Lives of Others, discovered through reconstructed fragments that his second wife, Jenny Grollmann, had been listed as an informant. The revelation, pieced together from torn pages, led to a public dispute and a court order that barred him from discussing the details. For Muehe, as for thousands of others, the archive was not just a bureaucratic legacy, but a source of personal rupture. The vastness of the Stasi's records was both its strength and its undoing. Every page threatened to expose the machinery of betrayal that kept the regime in power. The more complete the paperwork, the greater the risk that the truth about collaborators, about methods, about the everyday compromises of life under surveillance would one day come to light. In the final weeks of the German Democratic Republic, the Stasi headquarters in Lichtenberg became a factory of destruction. From November 9, 1989, shredders ran without pause, grinding secret files into confetti day and night. The noise echoed through the corridors, pages fed by the armful, motors overheating, gears jamming under the weight of panic. When the machines broke down, agents tore documents by hand, stuffing fragments into brown sacks. The air grew thick with dust and urgency. Each sack was a last-ditch attempt to erase the record of a surveillance state unraveling in real time. The pace was frantic but clumsy. Shredders burned out, their motors seizing after hours of continuous use. Stasi officers, desperate to keep up, ripped files into strips and filled the halls with piles of torn paper. The plan was to incinerate the evidence, but the volume overwhelmed every schedule. By January, thousands of sacks waited in the basement, each one a potential time bomb of memory and accusation. On January 15, 1990, a crowd gathered outside. Civil rights activists, former dissidents, and ordinary Berliners forced their way into the complex. Eyewitnesses recall the crush of bodies on the stairwells, the sound of boots on concrete, and the sudden silence as they reached the archive vaults. Inside, they found the sacks untouched, the destruction paused, but not complete. Working in teams, the activists formed a human chain, passing bags hand to hand out of the basement. Some cataloged the contents, others guarded the exits. The rescue took hours. By nightfall, the last intact sacks had been secured. The regime's attempt at erasure had failed, not because of official orders, but because ordinary people refused to let the past be lost. In that moment, the future of the archive hung on collective courage, not the machinery of the state. Marianne Berthler, former federal commissioner for the Stasi records, once stated that every torn page matters, no matter how small or damaged. The decision to keep all 16,000 sacks of shreds was never just about the past. It was a statement about what a democracy owes to its citizens, the right to the truth, even when it is painful, even when it is incomplete. Each fragment, each faded line, stands as evidence against forgetting. The files that survived destruction did not simply gather dust. When reassembled, some revealed the scale of East Germany's state-sponsored doping program, exposing how athletes' bodies became tools of policy. Other pages, pieced together from the chaos, documented the Stasi's connection to the Red Army faction, details that would later support criminal prosecutions and rewrite the accepted history of political violence in Germany. Berthler defended the painstaking work in public statements and policy papers, arguing that the preservation of even the most compromised evidence was a civic act. The alternative, burning, burying, or ignoring the shreds, would have denied future generations any chance to confront what happened. For her, the archive's value lay not just in what it revealed about the regime, but in what it asked of the present: to face uncomfortable truths, to allow for personal reconciliation, and to prevent the machinery of surveillance from vanishing without a trace. In Berlin, the decision to keep every page was not only about exposing the crimes of the past, it was about giving society the means to reckon with its own memory and to ensure that the record, however fragmented, remains open to all. Berlin's buried scars refuse erasure. The city's preserved tunnels, bunkers, and surveillance archives serve as living evidence. They are reminders that authoritarian control thrives in darkness and silence. Even now, new forms of surveillance and division emerge across Europe. As long as these structures endure, so does the warning. Trust is fragile, and history's shadows are never fully sealed. What we choose to remember shapes what we become.